am sure that that has been able to help you into the jobs that you want to be in, because you're voicing what you want and what you feel is correct. I definitely agree with the fact that you should never go into something if you don't ethically agree with them or agree with that. So 100% I agree with that.
Absolutely. Versus like when you're a new graduate and you nod and say yes no matter what, because you want to get the job and you value that more than what really is going through your head with the thoughts. You know, I've been there and I've done that multiple times. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the best fitting job for me because I should have known better.
Hi, everybody. This is Wendy Aldaman. I am the COO and I am the founder of Career Elevation. Today, we have Sarah Clark with us. She's going to be answering a whole bunch of questions. We're going to be chatting. And Sarah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. First, thanks, Wendy, for having me on this. I'm super excited to be able to share some insight that hopefully you all can use. So as Wendy said, my name is Sarah Clark. I am a dental hygienist practicing in Maine. I have my hands in many, many things. So not only am I a dental hygienist, which I have my associate's degree in dental hygiene, but I have been a speaker over the last few years. So I've spoken nationally. I've written for national dental hygiene publications. I've educated other dental professionals, and I work in private practice dental hygiene. Along with that, I'm also a huge advocate for the dental industry. So I'm involved in 2 nonprofit boards and working to continually evolve those things and see what other projects come from that. And the last thing I have my hands in that I truly, truly love, it's one of my passion projects. I'm actually the editor and the content writer for a dental newsletter publication. So that one's a little bit newer for me, but it's been a super fun project. So thank you again, Wendy, for having me here.
I didn't know that. What newsletter? Can you speak about that or not really?
Yeah, so I am the newsletter editor and writer for Dental Toaster. So they are a dental continuing education company owned by Claire Zhang. She does student RDH as well. So for some dental professionals out there, they may be very familiar with student RDH. So Dental Toaster is kind of that segue. So student RDH is obviously for dental hygiene students to prepare them to practice and study for the board exam. And as they graduate, they're going to need a stronger foundation to transition into clinical practice and grow. So Dental Toaster starts to provide some dental CE online that helps you refresh on things like local anesthesia and pharmacology. And many of the great dental speakers are also building content out there for more seasoned professionals. So every 2 weeks I write up a super fun little newsletter where I start out with something motivational. From there, I'm able to go into celebrating a dental professional who's achieved something. And I like it because it can be anything from maybe you bought your first house to pay off a student loan, or maybe you were published in a national dental hygiene magazine. So, you know, there's no win that's too small to celebrate. We provide some insight as to what's going on in the dental world. So I feature an article where I talk about that article and the viewpoints in it. Usually a video is shared as well. So maybe a public health video, it could be a dental tip or trick. And then at the end, we share one of our courses. So that's been a super great project that I've absolutely loved doing recently.
That's so cool. I didn't know that. I'm happy that you elaborated on that.
Thanks. Yeah, I really do love it.
And I'm especially glad that you elaborated extra, because when you say dental toasters, I immediately went to Toastmasters thinking that maybe it's for hygienists that want to, you know, pursue public speaking or something. So I'm glad that you elaborated on that and that you were able to explain a whole lot more.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, you can check it out, dentaltoaster.com. It's fantastic.
Wonderful. And actually, with you saying in the beginning that you are always putting some kind of motivation in there, no win is too small, that leads me right to my next question. How do you create positivity now, especially because we're talking about COVID and everything? I am always a positive Polly, and I'm always trying to see the better side in things. And I'd like to see your take on how do you create positivity now?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a solution-based thinker, and I think that's probably one of the biggest ways that we or I myself promote positivity, people are a lot more comfortable if you're providing a solution to a problem. So right now, like you're saying, COVID is this huge issue that we're facing in the entire world, not just dentistry, my career path. But people are scared, they don't know what's going on, and from that we see a lot of fear-based responses. So when you take that and you start looking at it from a solution-based mindset, and you say, you know, I've had time to digest this a little bit, what if we did this? Then it gives people that little bit of hope, that comfort, that people are A, looking for a solution, B, potentially the solution you propose is going to make them more comfortable or feel more safe in that situation as well. So putting out solutions to kind of mitigate those problems is how I definitely feel I spread positivity.
So it sounds like you might wait a little while before you answer a question. How long do you usually wait? Do you sit on it? Like, there's so many people who say, you know, sleep on it, or wait 24 hours before you answer something that's like really big or really trying. Do you have anything like that you do?
I'm a researcher, so that kind of leads me in two different paths here. The first one is I already have a pretty broad and expansive knowledge base. The second side is I may not know yet. So if I already have that knowledge, I'm usually able to share that. A lot of what I'm seeing now throughout the dental groups out there are people that have general questions about their employment situation, COVID, and whatnot. I'm able to say, hey, look, I've already looked into that, or I may have experienced that. This is what I found. So that solution-based thinking is coming back through, and I can respond pretty immediately. But I've definitely seen some things where I'm like, that's a really valid point. And, you know, those fear-based comments may be coming through really rapidly, and it's just kind of feeds on the hysteria, and you see the comment section grow from 2 to 500 within a minute or two.
Right.
And that's when I'm like, I'm curious about this. I've reached out to other friends or colleagues in my industry who've maybe dealt with that, or that I know specialize in those areas. I've done my own research, evidence-based, and Google searches. It's amazing what you can find when you cross-reference the two. And then once I'm really confident in my answer, that's when I'll go back and provide some feedback.
Awesome. Awesome. So lots of research.
Oh, definitely.
And I feel like more people should be doing that. And right now, especially with double the people on social media and double the time that they're on social media right now, you know, a lot of people are just hitting the share button. And there's been plenty of times where I see one person in my newsfeed, and it's like literally only her. And it's, you know, she's sharing into different groups. So, and maybe she wants to get the news out there right away, but sometimes I think we got to sit on it just a minute and think about it before we share a lot of things. So,
and a lot of people will do the research for you. So my favorite thing to do with a post like that is click it and scroll the comments. That's usually my first source of research, because there's people that have already done it. So most of the time, that's how I'm easily able to decide, you know, is this a valid point? Is it not? And if somebody really makes me think it where I'm not sure, or I want to cross-reference their research, I can kind of go that step ahead of that. But I'm definitely like, I can't even count how many like comment threads I've read. I probably have read more of those than like books in my life.
Right. I'm kind of doing the exact same thing right now. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yep.
My next question that I've got for you is, what do you see as one of the biggest struggles that you see with hiring within the office that you're working at? And I know that you're not a hiring manager, but from your perspective of a team member, what do you think the biggest struggle is with that process?
Right. So I would say for myself, as something that could be a struggle, or that I feel like is a struggle, that may be kind of an unknown struggle for people out there in the hiring process. And this would be outside of my office that I'm talking right now. This is just in general. You know, I have a lot of really strong qualities and strengths that can apply to things other than dental hygiene. You know, I'm already a newsletter editor. I've written for multiple publications. I'm great with people. I'm very articulate. So I've definitely toyed before with looking at, you know, I love writing newsletters. I love doing that proofreading side of things and creating fun content. Maybe during all this insanity, I would go into a editor job or something of that sort afterwards. So even scrolling that, the strict HR guidelines to get into somewhere where if on paper you don't fit this, then you're automatically not a good choice. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow, and I understand why it's done. You have to weed out people somehow. But I'm like, if you only knew what I could do for you, because throwing down a resume that shows an associate's degree in dental hygiene looks like it should go to the bottom of the pile when it comes to a job, so to say, as like a newsletter editor. And I'm like, I already do this. It's just in my own industry, you know? So I think that's a really hard struggle that a lot of people experience, just a lot of people don't realize it.
Yeah, and they say that you've only got 6 seconds. When somebody has a resume, they pick it up for the very first time, they say you have 6 seconds to make that first impression in order to go in the yes pile or into the no pile. So I totally see that struggle there. And what I would recommend in that case would be, if you wanted to find a position like that, would be to specifically tailor your resume to reflect that more, to show more of your education and your volunteer work and your extra things that you do versus just your employment. So
I think that's super good advice. I think people should have multiple resumes. I have probably 3 or 4 of my own actually that I've had professionally done, just because, like you said, there's so many differences. And if I throw out all of my education out there and my clinical knowledge, nobody's going to want to read that for that position. They're going to be, this landed here on accident. So I do have some writing resumes that show those sorts of things. Now, I think another consideration too is what platform you're applying on. So Indeed has always been one of my favorite things to scroll through forever. Granted, however that employer utilizes it makes it more difficult to tailor it in some way, because they've got, you know, the bullet point questions where you can only select an option, or do you fit this, yes or no, and you're like, well, I can't lie, but I can't, you know, the blank isn't exactly fitting to my expertise. So I think that process could be a little revamped on the HR side of things to really truly allow others that you might not think would be the great fit for your job, but actually could be the best, you know, person you have for that position available.
I totally agree. And I haven't been on the hiring side in quite a number of years, but I know from my perspective, from my side, I see that there is an availability for me to message to you. Would you be able to message to me? I believe there is.
It depends, I believe, on what controls the employer sets, because you can say, so it's like you absolutely can't do anything except submit your Indeed resume, which I'm also not a fan that sometimes you can't attach your resume, it looks like. They just, like, you have to type it in the boxes on Indeed and send it through. So it's a little bit of a dated system. I think it could be a little more user friendly so that people can really show their true strengths and have that beautiful resume you paid for actually displayed on there. But, you know, I'm sure that there's other ways to get around it, which hopefully I know I've done some in the past, like directly communicate with the company instead of going through that platform. But it's one of those things that it's like always on the forefront of my mind, like, oh, this again, I've got to figure out how to navigate this obstacle.
Yeah. And another point that I would say is, if you can't find them on Indeed, if you can't message to them, then, you know, go find the company and send them your resume that way. And there must be a way to be able to upload your resume, because I've gotten several resumes that are very pretty that you can download. But it looks like the majority of people just do like what you said, you just kind of type in, you update on Indeed. So there is that feature, and maybe there's an upgrade, an update, I don't know. But
well, I know I've been able to in the past, but I know sometimes I haven't been able to. It only takes like your annoying little text boxes that you put in. I'm like, I just want to upload mine. I don't want to use that one at all. Like, come on.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like Indeed should be one of those websites that should be just like click and play, like make it super easy. But sometimes I feel like Indeed really needs to ramp up and do a little bit of a better job. They're a good platform for sure, but
Absolutely, yeah.
there's a lot of things about them that I wish that they would upgrade and update for sure.
Definitely.
So I'm sure that you've been in the office when a new hire is coming in, so potentially an interviewee or maybe the first day of a new employee there. What is the weirdest or the funniest thing that you've seen or you've heard in an interview? And how can we help our listeners to not make that mistake? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, okay. So one that comes to mind that like the office manager that I have now and myself continually laugh about, because we're constantly interviewing and looking to have new candidates as we grow. And I'm very fortunate that I'm included in many of those conversations. And this one girl was asked, you know, she was at the point of actually getting the job. And the office manager said, you know, how excited are you about getting this job? And she said like a 5. Like she rated us halfway on the scale of 1 to 10, and she said like a 5. And my office manager was like, really? Well, maybe it's not the best place for you. And they actually ended up retracting the offer to employment because she was just like, you know, I don't really care. It's just whatever.
Oh my goodness. But was it her scale was a 1 to 5, or did the office manager say 1 to 10?
She was like, just how excited are you? She didn't tell her, give me a scale. And the girl was like a 5. She's like, what do you mean? She's like a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
We were like, oh, okay. And a second girl that we had interviewed, and this one was super, super recently. She had interviewed with us, you know, and we liked her a lot. Great personality, seemed really willing to do the job. She had a strong love for animals. So anytime she could talk about those, that was coming through, even in the interview process for dentistry. And afterwards, you know, our office manager said to her, have you ever thought about going into, you know, veterinarian or vet tech or working in a veterinarian's office or, you know, an animal shelter, just something with animals, because it sounds like you're really passionate, which was a genuine connection and some advice. She was a younger girl. And the girl was like, no, I haven't yet, but you know, I would really like this job. She was going to be a sterilization technician and said, you know, I could translate that maybe someday in the future. And we're like, yeah, that's great. I like that connection that you made. So it was a couple weeks later, we had done some other interviews, and my office manager reached back out and said, hey, look, I'm willing to offer you this job. And she was like, actually, you know what? I think I'm going to take your advice and I'm going to go and look for a job with animals. So we were like, okay. So
now I think that that's actually a great thing.
Yeah, I think it's good for her, but we were all just a little stunned about it, like to wait for us to recontact and offer the job. And actually, to clarify too, she didn't give an immediate response. She said, let me think about it for a couple days.
Oh, I see.
Thought about the job after like really pursuing it and following up. And, you know, she had actually come to our office and asked for the manager and asked to apply. So it wasn't like a random, I sent in my resume. It was like really highly pursued. And then after she thought about it for like another week, she called back and said, I think I'm going to go work with animals. So I commend her on like working with her passion, but it could have been communicated a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I do that as a hiring manager as well. And there's been plenty of times where I actually have a for instance. There was somebody who was saying that she loves her job. Like, she said she loved her job like 20 times. And she's like, but I don't want to work at home anymore. And I'm like, well, why don't you go to a coffee shop or like, you know, go and rent just a one singular cubicle in town? And she's like, but that's going to cost me money. But I love my job. I'm like, I'm not going to hire you if you love your job. And she's like, well, how do you know that I'm not going to love working here? And I'm like, well, I don't, but how do I know that you're going to stay working here?
Right. And, so, you know, if somebody feels that strongly, you also have to, from your side, know that they're likely going to be comparing everything to that job that they loved the entire time. So that's a really tough place to be in. But most of what I would say on our side of seeing hires come in has been a lack of communication on their part to ours, or, you know, things that just kind of made us scratch our head. We had one girl interview for the front desk where we'll bring somebody in for half a day just to see if they like the office, the atmosphere, the team, and pay them. So, you know, there's no, we're getting free labor out of you or anything. So she was sitting at our front desk, super sweet, was doing fantastic, and said, I'm going to go get a notebook out of my car, and left and never came back. And we were just like, oh my word. That was, again, over our heads, we were just baffled that somebody would do that and not just be like, you know, I don't think it's the right fit for me. So at this point, I'm gonna leave. And nope, she just went and got her notebook, and the notebook didn't exist, and she was gone.
Deuces.
Yeah, she peaced out.
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of people who you will schedule an interview with, or they'll even come in and you'll invite them after the interview to have them come in, and they just no call, no show. And
yeah,
that is one of the things that just absolutely drives me bonkers. I hate when people do that. And not only from the employer point of view, but from the employee point of view as well, because even though they don't know us as much as we know them, we feel like there's some kind of an attachment there, even though they have only interviewed with us for 20 minutes, but comparatively to all the other people, we have some kind of an attachment. And last time I hired somebody, I had probably over 200 resumes that came in. I contacted about 50 of those people. 15 I scheduled an interview with. 8 of them came in. So going from 200 down to 8 is like a huge deal. And so it's like, I just don't understand. Like you already are winning the lottery here by getting an interview, and you're gonna just blow it. So
we dealt with that a lot. We have a huge dental assistant and dental hygienist shortage here in my area right now. So it came to a point where we had like one dental assistant between 2 doctors. I mean, it was crazy. The people that left were for good reason. Somebody went to dental school. Sure. So things like that. You know, it wasn't that they were like, I hate this place, peace out. And there was like this firestorm on social media that drove everybody away. But we had like 14 dental assistants that were all supposed to come in for interviews, and about 3 of them actually showed up for their initial interview. And then out of the 3 that did to do the working interview, again, that is a paid working interview, the night before, the office manager's calling and confirming with them, and they said, yes, absolutely, I'll be there. And then they're supposed to be there for 7:30 the next morning. 8:30 rolls around, and I'm going, hey, is so-and-so coming today? And nope, didn't hear a thing from them. Try to call back. Absolutely no answer. For a little bit, we had a problem that the applicants were all coming from the same kind of like training program. Sure. So we had even reached out to that program, and they said, you know, we're trying to really kind of make it so we are telling them that this is a really important thing to be following through with. And it didn't change anything. And then at that point, it didn't matter who it was, where they were coming from. But I couldn't believe it. We probably had 15 to 20 people no-show us during that process.
Yeah, it's crazy. And what's crazy to think about for me is that could be the job of your dreams. Right. You have no idea. And just because the interview maybe didn't go the best, I still always will think, well, why didn't you want to take the next step? Because this could have been your dream job. I mean, and maybe you don't want to be a sterilization tech. Maybe you want to be an assistant, or maybe you want to be a hygienist. You could meet the love of your life at this dental practice. Who knows, you know? Right. Actually, what's kind of funny is I was working at the office that I hated. Like in every single example of whatever I have on my website, my podcast, my videos, I always talk about this job that I hated. I took x-rays on my husband there before I knew him. That's so I had never even met him. The other ladies were saying, hey, there's this really cute guy. He's, you know, tall, dark, and handsome, and he's got dimples for days. Wendy, go take x-rays on him, because he was a new patient. And so I took x-rays on him, and I didn't even realize, like I didn't remember, because his English was just shit. And so I was like, there's no way, like I can't communicate with this guy. He won't even talk to me. And he just, you know, turns out he's just super shy. And so I find out later on when I go to get his x-rays for another office I was working at, I was the one who took them. And then I remembered the whole thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just hilarious. So you could meet the love of your life, and what are you doing? You're no-showing.
You know what I try to tell people too is your resume gets put in a drawer on the bottom with notes in it.
Yeah.
You know it's going to be that you blew them off. So in 3, 4, 5 years from now, that might be your best option, and they're going to remember that, and you burned that bridge. So it might not have been the opportunity that you wanted today, but as we all know, the future changes so rapidly. I mean, look at the past couple months. Who would have ever thought, right? So why burn that bridge when all you have to do is communicate effectively? Employers aren't going to take it personally, and if they took it personally, then that's great advice on your end that you know you don't want to end up there in the future. So don't burn that bridge prematurely.
No, and I 100% agree with that. And the other little caveat that I have to say about this is, what if you're not interviewing with a manager that works there, but you're interviewing with another company? Because you don't know if this hiring manager actually works there, or if they work for a big company that is helping hire for like 50 different offices. You show to that one place, you're out for all 50 of those offices.
Yeah, absolutely. And even for something as small as the dental community, I mean, they all talk whether they're in competition to hire you or not. I know that for us, there's been a tight network of other dental professionals, and people have not been offered jobs at other places because it was found out that they no-showed on our office. So that's a ripple effect. It's going to follow you whether you think that it will or won't. So it's definitely something super important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we went down this rabbit hole, because I try to drill this home with like everybody. Never no-show, never ghost anybody. Like, it's just crazy. I just don't understand the whole fascination behind that.
Yeah, I know. It's I've never understood it either. It was drilled into my head in dental hygiene school that, I'm a professional. This is what you do. You follow through, you communicate, and never, never, never put a mark on your name like that. That's just, gosh, the ramifications that can come from that are extensive. Guarantee you're making up your dental hygiene salary or whatever salary you were making beforehand. But if you work at it, continue to make connections, and keep those few things in mind about getting started, you can absolutely be successful.
I 100% agree. And when we met in Mirada, that was for speaking. So we were learning how to speak and learning how to do it better. And, I almost kind of wish that in there, they would have also told us, you have to approach people. People aren't going to approach you. If you put out one piece of content and then you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'm just going to wait. People don't, that's not how it works. Like, you have to almost be needy in a way. You have to continue to follow up, because if you have your shit together and you go and speak, you're going to get speaking engagements left and right. And if you don't get speaking engagements left and right, then continue to build on it, continue to learn from it, join Toastmasters and learn how to speak better. And I 100% agree with that you have to decide, you have to create your content, and networking is a really, really good thing to do. I mean, we have the internet at the tip of our fingers, and we should be
now. It's so easy. Almost every opportunity I've had has been because of networking and social networking, where if somebody wasn't directly able to help me, they were able to get me on the good side of a colleague of theirs who was then willing to help me because I knew this specific person, which led to speaking gigs, writing gigs, people who could help me kind of hone my craft or understand where to go for certain resources, or even somebody to mentor you. That all came from reaching out. I can't count how many times I've sent rogue emails to whoever it may be in the world, just like hoping for something to come of it. Even if a position isn't necessarily created, if it relates to a job, ask if it can be, see if they need that service. You're not limited to just waiting and then responding reactively. Be proactive in what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I have right next to me, I have my very first speaking check. And you know, it kind of makes me stay motivated and stay hungry that I was doing it for our local chapter, and I wasn't going to get paid. And at the end, she was like, "You have been probably our very best speaker that we've had, and I feel bad if I don't write a check to you." So it was a smaller amount, but any amount over $0 is 100% worth it.
It is. It feels so good. And even if it is $0, you know, the first few times I spoke, you know, I'm still young. Many people see me that way. So one of my greatest fears was going up into an audience of seasoned hygienists and trying to give them my input, because you can tell the second they look at me, they're like, okay, like, what is this newbie going to tell me about practicing? And I've been practicing for 6 years, to give you all a reference on that. So I waltz on up there and I start introducing myself, and, you know, I always cringe a little when I say I'm a 2014 graduate, because I already know what's going in their head and when I'm opening with that. And then I go through my course, and at the end, people just come up and say, thank you, that was amazing. Or you see the nodded heads in the audience because they're connecting and they're like, this is so relatable, this is fantastic. And then from there, I actually have had some in older generations come up and say, I won't lie, I was a little nervous when I saw how young you were, but that was phenomenal. So don't let that age factor, you know, kind of hinder you either.
And that's another factor to talk about with networking, because you become a thought leader when you continue to talk about the same thing over and over, and then you speak on it. And because, especially in dental, where like it seems like you've heard the same thing over and over and over, and when you've heard one person, you've heard maybe the same kind of title, it's like, I've already heard it once, I've seen all of their content, and then a brand new person comes out. Even if you've only been doing this for 6 years, you can talk to people who've been doing it for 6 months, and you can talk to people who've been doing it for 25 plus years, and they will still always walk away with some kind of new information, some kind of new piece of nugget that maybe you were the 10th person to say just about the exact same thing, but they heard it from you and they're going to implement it from you. So it really is the delivery of your speech.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's been one of the most validating things for me, that I'm like, okay, once you get that first one down and people love your message and share that with you, it's so much easier to keep doing it after that, because you're like, okay, that wasn't absolutely horrible. And but on the flip side of that too, I think it's also important to know that not everybody's going to agree with you all the time. So when you speak, I mean, it's so easy to sit in the back of the room and then just write terrible things on an anonymous, you know, anonymous grading sheet or whatever we call it, evaluation. So don't take those things to heart either, because it's going to happen. And the best advice I ever got was like, when you finally get your first hater, like that's when you know you made it. So
yeah. And thank those haters, because honestly, the reason why I'm here today is because someone told me that I shouldn't be an office manager. And I shit on her dreams. I became the best office manager. The person who I used to work for, that she used to work with, he has told me multiple times, you were the best employee that I've ever had. And he was a dentist for 54 years. That is a remarkable thing to say. So just shit on their dreams and be better next time and next time and next time.
Exactly. Because I mean, everybody's going to have a different opinion. So do what you love to do, and droves of people will follow you after that love your message, and they'll support you and they'll uplift you, and that'll just continue to grow for sure.
100%. Failing is important. What is something that you've recently failed at, and how did you learn from it?
This is a super tough one. I know you told it to me before we started, and this whole time I've been like, oh, what is that? I would say for me, usually that comes on my own personal level.
Sure. That's
And
totally fine.
yeah, that would be more for me, like saying, yes, I'm going to make this move. And I would say since I graduated in 2014, I've said, someday I'm not going to be full-time in clinical dentistry. And that's carried over to the point that I'm up through until the COVID pandemic really hit. I've still been full-time in dentistry, even though I'm doing all these other things. And that's been the piece that's been really hard for me to let go. So that's my goal as we work through this COVID thing, is to maybe make that shift finally. But that's been, I would say, one of my biggest failures that I'm continually working through. And I think that's a good way to look at it too, is it's a continual work in progress. Just because it was a failure today doesn't mean it has to be a failure tomorrow either.
100% agree. I have a mentor. Her name is Grace Rosa. I'm sure you probably know who she is. Yes. And I remember my very first phone call with her. She asked me, when was the last time you failed? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, no, like actually answer that question. And so I thought about it for like 15 seconds before answering. And I said, honestly, I can't think of a time that I failed, because I always try to learn from my failures. And she goes, yeah, but you're not failing big enough, so you're not trying hard enough. And I'm like, oh, I hate you right now.
Because that's the push. It's true. We're not failing if we're not putting ourselves in those uncomfortable positions like we talked about. And for me, one of the biggest reasons I haven't had one of those big come to mind failures like what you're talking about now too is for that reason, I would say. It's because I've not put myself in that position to fail. I've put myself in slightly uncomfortable positions, but I've always had my backup where, if it didn't pan out, it didn't really matter because it's not affecting my paycheck. It's not really affecting my day-to-day life. And that's been a huge focus for me over these last weeks at home, is changing that. So maybe I do something, or I will do something moving out of this. That could be the huge failure, but like I was saying earlier, go back to your job or a job. It doesn't have to be the job you were at before, but there's going to be something available.
Yeah. And I know, but I know that you don't have to share it, but I know that you have gone through an incredible amount of change within the last year and a half. Internet time seems like it's just, a time warp, so it's hard to tell, but within the last short amount of time, you have had to do a lot of different things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fail in your career, but in your personal life, I know that you've taken some things to heart that your family has disagreed with, and that's maybe a failure to them, but clearly it's not a failure to you because you pursued it, you finished it, you did it. And I commend you for that. I think that you've done a great job, and I was trying to put myself in your shoes when I read that one post, which we don't have to talk about, but I read one of your posts and I was like, oh gosh, your family is like so into your life. And I can understand and be empathetic towards that. And I'm thankful that I don't have to be in your shoes for that instance. But, I'm in the same kind of shoes with different instances. But, I think personally and professionally, we're all going to have failures. But it's a failure to somebody else, but it's a win to somebody else. So if it's a win to you, then freaking rock on.
Well, yeah. And I know, obviously having watched that, a lot of it's perceived too. So for me, it's always been a stressor of what are they going to think more so versus are they not going to support me or not? And they've always supported me in anything I've done. So wherever that comes from is very, I don't know where it comes from necessarily.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to watch this. So I'm probably not going to put that piece of it out there. So
yeah, that's okay.
So, but yeah, you've got to make the changes that make you happy in your life, however difficult those may be. It's extremely important to do that, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you have to find people in your life, if it's your family, if it's your friends, if it's your colleagues, that will support you, because that support is going to help you continue to grow personally and professionally. And you really have to have some people behind you. Whether that's, again, if it's friends that you're going to go find to be able to help support you, or if that's people that's already in your life, but having a support system of some kind. All right, what is a common myth about your profession that you would like to answer or debunk?
Common myth for dental hygiene specifically would be that it's super easy and you make a whole bunch of money for the schooling. It's kind of turning around now when it comes to the sense of that there's millions of jobs available. For a long time, it was really saturated, and that wasn't true. And programs were really advertising it that there's a shortage, which they're really going based off public health data about needing providers in those scenarios versus actual private practice providers. So, common myth, it is super hard to go through dental hygiene school. It is a lot of work. You will probably cry, and if you don't, then good for you. It's incredible. It's a lot of money to get licensed. I took 5 board exams to get my dental hygiene license.
Really? Wow.
I took 5 board exams. Yeah, I took a national board exam. I took a regional, which is broken up into a patient exam and a written exam. I took a local anesthesia, a nitrous, and then a state board. And a lot of people don't realize that just because you get licensed doesn't mean you can move wherever you want. Every state you go has its own regulations. You need a new license, and sometimes that requires you to retake board exams. So if you're somebody that ever wants to move around, you definitely might want to consider that before getting a dental hygiene license.
You know, that's the same thing with being an assistant. If you want to be a certified or a registered dental assistant, that's the exact same thing. Depending on the state, if you want to carry that license over, which, you know, going from an on-the-job training, which you can do, to a certified or a registered, it's going to make a really big deal in pay scale. And so that's a great little piece to add in there.
Yeah, and they don't come right out and tell you any of that. I remember I was in hygiene school and I found out I had to take 5 board exams. So it's not like something I knew beforehand that helped me make my decision. You know, I didn't even know necessarily the details about license transportability, or I should say lack thereof, until I was graduated and working and started looking at some of that stuff. So I think that's probably one of the most helpful things that somebody going into it should know.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Good. On a scale of 1 to 10, not 1 to 5, 1 to 10, how do you think that you do in interviewing, in job searches, in creating your resumes, and how are you working on the negative parts of that?
Yeah, you know, I would say I'm probably between like an 8 to 9, modestly. I try not to be like, I'm a 10. You know, I've never not had a job when I wanted a job, so I'm very fortunate in that sense of things. I think it actually used to be easier for me in a sense, and it's gotten more difficult for me. And I would say that's because my knowledge base has expanded, and with all the things that I'm doing outside of clinical hygiene, walking back into an office who's like, we all do this one way and we all follow this. And it's really hard for me because I have a lot of my own thoughts on how I want to treat my patients. And a lot of those are a lot more advanced than some of these offices are at. And it's very difficult for me to not speak up and want to be the educator. So even in an interview, I'm very vocal about like, I'm not going to do that, or no, I think you're wrong. And so that can definitely hinder, obviously, because then they're going to be like, well, who are you? Like, why are you trying to come in here and change everything? So that's something that I try not to actually let hinder me, and I don't really want to change it. If anything, that's more validation as to why I need to move into doing other things, because, you know, I'm at the point I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm going to say it. So I got a long way to go in life, so.
Yeah, well, you know, that's not a terrible thing, but I am sure that has been able to help you into the jobs that you want to be in, because you're voicing what you want and what you feel is correct. I definitely agree with the fact that you should never go into something if you don't ethically agree with them or agree with that. So 100% I agree with that.
Absolutely. Versus like, when you're a new graduate and you nod and say yes no matter what, because you want to get the job and you value that more than what really is going through your head with the thoughts. You know, I've been there and I've done that multiple times. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the best fitting job for me because I should have known better. But the thought of getting the job was more exciting than the thought of agreeing with the job. So it definitely limits your opportunities. I won't lie about that, but you're going to get quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm. That last like 2 sentences could not be more true. And I'm going to take that little snippet and I'm going to put it in a quote and say Sarah Clark at the end of it, because that needs to be shared 100%.
I agree. People are too worried about getting an offer. They're not necessarily worried about the offer that's the best fit for them. And we have to remember that if you're interviewing, you're also interviewing that job. Yeah. So it's not a grovel to get the job. It's to see if you're fitting and you agree with it, and will that really be the best fit for, you know, yourself and your goals.
Yeah, and I have a PDF that is free to download. It's on my website, and I'll put a link below as well. That is it's a PDF, and it says interview the interviewer. Mm-hmm. Because you are interviewing them just as much as what they're interviewing you, because you're going to be working there with them. So why should it only be an interview one way?
Right. And they want you to be honest, because they want to hire the right fit. So if you're not speaking openly about the things that you know you can't compromise on, then you're going to get the job, but it's not going to end well. And you just wasted all that time when you could have been looking for the fit that is what you're actually hoping to have.
Mm-hmm. And they want you to be open and honest as well, because they don't want to waste their time. It costs a lot of money to be able to hire somebody. And if it's going to be where you only are working there for 2 months and then you leave, and then they have to start the whole hiring process over again, all you have to do is just ask a whole bunch of questions and get a whole bunch of answers, and bada bing, bada boom, or find out if you like it or you don't.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let me do a little bit of a recap, but before I do, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should ask you, or that we should talk about?
Gosh, you know, at this point, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. We went on quite a few little tangents that I think would have been the things that I would have been like, this would be really good to talk about. But I appreciate that conversation. It was awesome.
Good. Wonderful. Okay. So Sarah Clark, as soon as I'm finished with this, I want you to tell our listeners where they can find you. So you are in a private practice. You are a registered dental hygienist. You are an editor of a newsletter publication called Dental Toaster. We have agreed that you create positivity because you are solution-based. Your favorite curse word is shit. The biggest struggle that you see with hiring is we need to have more than one resume. And the biggest thing that you see in interviews that we wish that we could never see again. I'm going to cut that part out because we didn't ask that question. Okay, let me do it.
Tangents about that, but we never really.
What did you say?
So we went on a few tangents that would have fit along with that, but
yeah, maybe I should highlight this next time I do one of these. Okay. The weirdest or the funniest thing that you've seen in an interview is maybe I like this job like a 5, and the fact that people no show. And what do you wish that you would have known before starting? You gave a lot of good examples with writing about being a hygienist and being a speaker. Feeling is important, and you're working on that just like everybody else should. Okay, Sarah, where can our listeners connect with you?
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook. I know everybody's there. I do have a professional page. You can look it up under Sarah Clark RDH. You can find me at sarahclarkrdh.com or email me at sarahclarkrdh@yahoo.com.
That is very simple.
It's all the same. It's a uniform, yeah.
Yes. Wonderful. All right. Thank you everybody for watching and for listening. Keep elevating your career and your life.